Hey everyone, this is Ryan, and today we're going to look at the basics of environment variables. There are a few main areas that we're going to take a look at today. The first is going to be how do we create an environment variable in the Power Platform ecosystem? What are the different types available to us? How to bring in an environment variable to a Power App using the set function. And then finally, we'll take a look at how do we export these environment variables from one environment and importing into another. Let's first take a look at what they are. So environment variables allow you to define unique values in each environment. So the great thing about them is you can use them as part of a Canvas app or, for example, a Power Automate flow. The other thing that you could do is they can have different values in each environment. So for example, you may have a dev environment and a production environment, and you could have different values for each, for this specific environment variable. So for example, let's say you have a color code that's different in your dev compared to your production, or let's say different app IDs or version control IDs. This allows you to differentiate between each environment so that you do not have to hard code the values in your apps or your Power Automate flow. So let's go and take a look at how to create them. So what we're going to do is go to Solutions on the left, go to a solution we've already created called Environment Variables 1. This solution actually contains an app that we'll use to bring in the environment variable. So to create a new one, we'll go to New at the top, More, and then Environment Variable. So here you'll see the display name. So you want to be as descriptive as possible. Since we just want to define what the current org we're in, we'll just say current org. And then here you can have a description. So if you want more context, you can do that here. And then you also have the different data types available to us. So you have decimal, text, yes, no, those are the basics. But you also have more complex data types. So you have JSON, so if you have structured data, a data source, so SQL Server connectors or a custom connector, and also a secret. So like for the Azure Key Vault, you can use that as well. In our scenario, we'll be using the text data type. And then we'll see a couple options available to us, one being the default value and current value. I always recommend entering in the current value. The reason why is no matter where you import your environment variables to, you should always set them right away. Default value is essentially your fallback if you happen to not have the current value filled out. So as I mentioned before, always fill out your current value. And click on Save. So at this point, once it's created, we will have to keep in mind the schema name. So here we'll have the LCGCO _ current org. That's important to us because we'll use it to query the tables in order to bring in our value. So let's hop over to our app. And then what you'll see is on the left-hand side, we actually want to go to our data sources first because there's two tables that we'll need in order to query environment variables. So if we click Add and we go to Environment, so we have environment variable definitions and environment variable values. We do need both. So let's click on the definitions and then we'll add the values. So once we have both tables added, we're going to go to our app function, and then we'll go to the onStart up here. Okay. So once you're on the onStart, I'll add this near the end, and we're going to use the set function. So we're going to set a global variable that can be used across all screens, and we're going to call it current org. And then at this point, we're going to actually look up to the environment variable values table. And then the reason why we had to bring in both tables is the environment variable values contains the value of our environment variable. And the definitions table actually contains like the schema name and all that stuff. So this is where when we're querying the environment variable values, we actually have to reference the definitions. So in our case, if we go down, you'll see environment variable definition, and then it allows us to bring in, for example, the display name, which you could use, which is current org, or we could use the schema name. So the schema name is essentially static at this point, because otherwise you would have to delete or recreate that environment variable, whereas display names tend to change over time. So in our case, we'll just enter in the name, so current org. We'll close up the lookup, and we don't want to bring in the whole record. All we want to bring in is the value. So this is the current value. And then we'll close the set. And then what we will do is actually display this on the form. So I will copy another label. I'm just going to make it a bit bigger. And what we will do is center it. And we'll make a bigger text. And we're going to swap this out from first name to current org. And then from here, you'll see that it's blank, which is not ideal. We want to see data in there, but the reason why it's blank is because we have not run the onStart function yet. So that's why it's blank. So if you click the ellipsis beside your app and you click run onStart, and then you will see dev then appear. So that's great. We have the value in our environment, or sorry, our Canvas app. But let's say if we want to make a change to it, it's not actually what we need. Let's say we made a spelling error or something like that. So if we go back to our other tab here and open up the current org environment variable, we can always make a change. So let's say dev2. And then if we go back to our Canvas app, what we can do is refresh the tables here. Okay, so if we go and update the environment variable values table, and then if we click the run onStart again, you see that will bring in the updated value. Okay, so it's pretty easy to use. They're stored in the common data service or Dataverse, and it's very easy to grab in through the set function with a simple lookup. Okay, so now that we have it in the app, let's take a look at actually exporting this Canvas app and the environment variable to a solution and importing it into another environment. So always save and publish your Canvas apps. And then we'll close it down, and then we'll do an export. Okay, so let's close. And from here, we'll go and export our solution. In our case, we're just going to do unmanaged. And what we will do is, you'll see in our next environment here, it's a sort of a blank slate. So we don't have any Canvas app environment variables. So I wanted to show you from scratch how it will work and how we set the current value to something new. Okay, so once this turns green, we're actually going to download the solution, and then we'll import it. So we'll click download. It's downloaded to our desktop here. So we'll click import, browse, and we'll select our environment variable solution. And then we'll click next. So when we click next, this is a fresh import here. So we'll click import. And then right now, those components are being imported to our solution, and then it will appear down here once this banner turns green. So we'll just wait for that. Okay, so now that our solution has been imported, we'll go into it. And what you will see is if we happen to go into the current org environment variable, you will see that it has our value from our previous environment, which is dev2. So we can actually just change that around. We're just going to switch that to prod. Okay, so it's a different value. So that's why I mentioned always set your environment variables like the current value whenever you import to a new solution for the first time. So if we happen to go and press play on our Canvas app, you will see that says prod at the top. Okay, so that's perfect. That's exactly what we wanted to see. Now there might be a concern of, okay, what happens if I happen to import the solution again? The great thing is if you import a solution again from, for example, from your development environment to, let's say, your test or production environment, it does not overwrite the current value. So once you update the current value in the environment you're in, any value that's brought over in the solution will not overwrite your current value. Okay, so that prod value, since we did the new import, will still be maintained. Okay, so if we go to current org, you will see prod there still. And if we open up our app, you will see prod at the top. So that's why it's very useful for, importing solutions. There's nothing overwritten once you set it the first time, and it works great. So that's actually it for environment variables and what I wanted to cover with you today. So we covered the basics of how to create, how to bring in a variable through the Power Apps, and also how to export from our dev environment into our production environment. Hopefully this helps you with the basics of environment variables and gives you a bit more context of how you can use them in your Canvas apps.